Find out whatever mechanism allows this ship to pass unharmed to Aladdin. Rip it out and install it in the frigate.
Aye, Captain Jod.
I need its firepower to seize the mint. What's this? On the com.
An incoming transmission.
Children, we're sending out this message on a communication buoy, hoping you'll hear it. Just know we love you so much. And Fern, I know how much you worry, but you're not in trouble. You're gonna make it home, and this message will tell you how. KB, my sweet girl, don't give up, no matter what. We know you must be scared to go so long without maintenance. But just get your friends.
We're trying to escape, we just want to hear.
To help keep you strong. And you shouldn't have too many malfunctions. Get home safe. To good old At-Atten, where you belong. You can make it home, Neil. My sweet baby boy. Oh, your little brother just lost a tooth. He got a shiny new datary, but he said all he wanted was his big brother. We can't transmit any coordinates due to security procedures, but you can get home. Find a Republic emissary.
That's an official who knows the secret location of At-Atten and how to get through the barrier. Be careful. The barrier can be very dangerous. But don't tell anyone else where you're from.
Oops.
I wish we could say more. You weren't supposed to find out about any of this until you graduate. Whim. I'm sorry I didn't listen to you. Please come home.
We need to take the ship back. But how? We need a plan. We could trick Jod. We know he's greedy. I mean, maybe we can even... Attack!
Welcome, Masters and Padawans, to episode 573 of Full of Sith. It's me, Bryan Young. With me, as ever, the redoubtable Holly Frey.
Hi!
Redoubtable Neil advocate, Holly Frey.
That's me hardcore.
Yeah. How's, I think that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, is we're going to go in depth on the Skeleton Crew since it's over.
Painful words to hear, but yes.
Let's not say it's over. Let's say the first chapter is
The season finale has aired.
Yeah. A story of the Skeleton Crew is complete, and the makers of the Skeleton Crew have said that they have ideas for more should Disney so bestow upon them, not Disney, Lucasfilm, so bestow upon them the money to make another season.
Right.
But yeah, it is over, and the story that we have is told, and I would love for more. I certainly would love for more. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Oh, I hope. My goodness, I hope. Ooh, sweet baby Greedo, give us more.
So I take it you liked it then?
I loved it so much more than I even anticipated loving it. Like, once they ran the trailer with the great Huttese version of Major Tom, I was like, I see, this might be very much in my wheelhouse. And it is.
Yeah.
I wasn't ever not excited for it, but like I wasn't sure how strong a connection I would have to a kid-centric show.
Yeah.
Right, just because that's not my zone normally. But in fact, I am madly in love with it.
It's interesting. I really loved it, and it was interesting to see how structurally it felt like it was created by folks who were very much movie screenwriters.
100%. Yeah.
because it was funny because there was a whole bunch of stuff that felt like it was going to pay off in the last episode that where the more TV based writers would have brought it in a little sooner. Um, the movie screenwriters are sort of waiting to pay it all off in the last minute. And I remember sort of as people were going through like, this why did they waste time going to do this and going to do that if it wasn't paying off till now, till now, till now. And they're like, these seemed like filler episodes and things like that. And as we were watching the last episode, all of a sudden I realized, just sort of cataloging everything in my head, I was telling Patty and Kingston, I was like, oh, I bet this and this happens. And they were like, shut up, those are spoilers. I'm like, I haven't seen it, I don't know. And they're like, but you know. And it was like, oh, Neil's gonna end up on the roof with the turbo laser. One of them's
Right.
gonna call Kim for help. The New Republic's gonna show up with X-Wings, and they're gonna end up in the supervisor's tower where they learned how to get up there. Like that's
Yeah.
um those are the things that they're gonna do. Those are the things that they
Those are
learned
the
on all
beats
those.
we have been prepared for.
Yeah, and they're like, I don't know. And because that's really how it would have worked as a movie. And I found it really interesting to hear that they developed this sort of like as a movie and then as a show, and then they thought about it as a movie again and then as a show. And I think Solo is probably the reason that they were like, okay, no movies, it's got to be a show.
Oh, yeah, that's possible.
But it was really well threaded together.
Mm, so much so. Um, I mean, I continue to marvel at it, how well it paces out information. I know I am a this is a drum you have heard me beat before. I hate the term filler episode
Oh, me too.
because if an episode doesn't necessarily move along the narrative in the way that you as an audience member expect, it's still telling a story that those people wanted to tell. So there's almost you kind of can't. It isn't as though this is particularly in shows like this that have a short arc compared to like 22 season 1980s network television, right? Like those sometimes had filler episodes where like they didn't have the time or a network suddenly added more episodes to a season, which does happen sometimes. Those are instances where you could potentially call something a filler episode, or like
But
when they would do a clip show. But there's almost no episode in any of these shows is gonna be that.
but sometimes those episodes turn out to be something really special too.
Oh yeah.
Um, like I don't know, I don't think you're a huge Doctor Who person.
I have only ever watched the Eccleston season,
Um,
so no.
but so one of the classic episodes that everybody hails as one of the best ever was what they looked at as a filler episode, and it was Blink. And the way they designed these episodes was that BBC said, well, we need one more episode a season, but we need to save money on it. So why don't you make it with supporting cast and then
Mhm.
save money by only having the Doctor and the companion in the episode on one day of shooting? And so they basically shoot an episode around not having the Doctor in it and have him show up a little bit. And they created Blink. And it's this filler episode around not having the Doctor in it. And it's like a supporting character trying to get to the Doctor. And it becomes this classic episode because they have this constraint around the fact that, like, we literally don't have the production budget to keep David Tennant
Oh,
on
this
the
is the one
set.
with the angels, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't have the production budget to keep our talent on the set for more than a day for this episode. So how can we make it cheaper and film an episode around it? So how do we write that and create something interesting around that? And those creative restraints of like, okay, how do I create something that still tells a story in the spirit of what we're trying to do, that's interesting, that still advances things and tells something about the character. um you know, why does everything have to move across the larger narrative, right? You think about Star Trek. If you had an episode like The Measure of a Man from Star Trek The Next Generation, people would be screaming about how that's a filler episode, but again, that's one of the
Right.
best episodes.
Right.
um some of my favorite episodes of the Clone Wars, Clone Wars was just all filler episodes, but they all added up to something terrific. um Based on what that criteria for filler episodes is. So I'm all on board with you, and I think that we should have longer seasons to have those episodes, because I think that's where a lot of the best creativity comes out. It doesn't all have to serve that overarching narrative. It could just be really cool one-off stories with our heroes or the supporting cast, or give them the spotlight, in interesting ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It feels like there is so much of the behavior of like armchair critic, which like everyone has opinions, and I'm not trying to say I don't have opinions, but I have been around long enough that I remember film and television from before the internet and after. And there is a difference in the way people consume and talk about their entertainment in terms of having access to enough information that everyone starts to feel like an expert, which
Yeah.
doesn't mean they are. But they have a lot more information. Like they're more informed for sure. But as a consequence, there are a lot of terms that get bandied about and kind of become buzzy ways to say I didn't like it that really take on a life of their own, and filler episodes is one of those.
Yeah, no, I read this exchange online where someone had to explain to someone, like, I have a PhD, you have Dunning-Kruger.
Right.
Um,
Um, I mean, listen, I'm in the midst of having like a thing right now where it's a little related but not. I'm venting a little about things that are not Star Wars, but like in the post Nosferatu release discussion with people, I have been a little surprised at how many people didn't already know that the whole point of Nosferatu was that it was bootleg Dracula. Like I have run into a shocking number of people in discussion who are like, "What do you mean it's a remake?" And I don't know what to do with that information, and it pains me because I'm such a Murnau fan.
yeah.
But but so they kind of have the information of I like horror movies or whatever, and then they're like, I don't understand. This is just Dracula with names changed and some of the stuff is different. And I'm like, yeah.
Like, your point?
And I'm like, buckle up because I'm going to tell you about the 1920s and Florence Stoker and how she wouldn't let anybody license that content for a movie. But it's similarly weird to me where I'm like, oh, you have some information, but not all the information.
Yeah. But so Skeleton Crew.
Yes.
We had a really, I think a really tightly paced season. I could have
Hmm.
stood to use more. I could have had
12
more.
episodes would have felt fine to me.
Yeah. I could have had more adventuring. I could have had more trips with them off the planet. I could have had filler episodes all over the place.
I would have watched Neil's family eat dinner for 45 minutes. That would have been fine by me.
Yeah. I would have loved to see them visit more of the galaxy. I would have loved to see more shenanigans with the pirates. I would have been happy to see more. I think that's my biggest complaint, is that it was almost too tight, that they didn't get that space to just kind of make it a little looser, right? Like,
Yeah.
it really did feel paced as tight as Goonies, right? You almost feel Goonies is a pretty tight, short movie, all things considered.
Yeah.
And that was Richard Donner having Steven Spielberg producing him. And Richard Donner's an incredible filmmaker and he's a master of tone. Richard Donner, if you haven't followed him as a filmmaker, he's just incredible. I mean, he did the first Lethal Weapon movie, he did Superman the movie, which is, in my view, still the definitive Superman
Oh, yeah.
movie. Um, and he did Goonies, among others. And he was just terrific with that tone. And I think these guys, John Watts and Christopher Ford, just really nailed it. And they kept his the thing that's so amazing about the Goonies is that wide-eyed sense of childlike wonder,
Yeah.
and they kept that really whole, and they kept it through. There's something magical about Goonies that I think connects to a lot of people where the kids go through some things and the kids are going through things, right? Like they're living in a situation where like they're going to lose their houses if they can't come up with this money because these evil developers are going to
Yeah.
take the entire, neighborhood away and they're going to have to move and they're going to have to say goodbye because they're all going to have to move in different directions and they get this idea that this last ditch effort, if they find this pirate treasure they'll all have enough money to save their houses and be able to stay together. And it's hilariously naive.
But it's also very sweet.
Yeah. And these kids kind of come up with, these kids kind of have this naivete about everything. And they have that similar, like they go through some really traumatic things the same way that the Goonies do, the Skeleton Crew does. And they never lose the childlike wonder of that naivete or that belief. And I think the ending here, especially between those looks that Jod and Wim share at the end, really exemplify that belief in basic goodness that the kids maintain, that Goonies really exemplifies too. And that's why I think the ending is so perfect, especially when Jod decides to turn the lightsaber off. Right? Jod could have taken revenge on all of them and killed everybody up in that in the supervisor's room, right?
Yeah.
Very easily, but he doesn't. And that I think is because of the kids. And I think it's because of Wim. And I think Wim gets to be that Jedi hero that he wanted to be. And I think it's the influence of the kids that they influenced him and taught him lessons every bit as much as he influenced them and taught them
Oh,
lessons.
for sure. I mean, I think Jod sees a lot of himself in Wim, and it's part of why that's, who he kind of lashes out at when he finally reveals the depth of his darker side, right? It's that thing where people get angriest at what they think is weak or shameful in themselves. And like
Yeah.
Jod has spent all of this time tamping down that sort of like exuberant, hopeful part of himself that wanted to also go and explore the galaxy because he had to toughen up and figure out how to survive. And so he pushed all of that away as a survival technique, but as a consequence, right, he has now come to view that as negative, like thinking positively about other people, caring about other people, etc. That's weakness and it's bad. And so when he sees Wim doing it, especially when it kind of works out in Wim's favor, it just messes with his entire sense of self and how he thinks everything works.
Yeah, especially because the people that he fell into were pirates, and the people Wim fell into were other kids who, like, he felt like Wim falls in with Neil,
Yeah.
who is this pure-hearted, good kid who the most violent thing he does is play slap ball, right? Like,
He's one of the best at it, though.
Yeah. I mean, I think Neil is up there with Jar Jar in the Star Wars universe as far as like loyal, pure-hearted characters.
Oh, yes.
And so Jod in his survival has to rely on people who will double cross him at any moment. And Wim has Neil, right? Who will never double cross him. Neil would never do that.
No.
Um, and so Jod has, yeah, absolutely has trouble processing what that's like. And he's trying to, I think, in his way, Jod, I think Jod really did go out of his way to try to keep those kids out of harm
Hmm.
and try to keep them out of the situation and try to not harm them. Which is why I loved how the last episode opened, where the parents are like, "We just really like to thank you." And he does turn the lightsaber off and send them home,
Yeah.
right? He's willing to con the parents as far as he can to not have to hurt the kids because he really doesn't want to. Because I think he really does like the kids and doesn't want to hurt them.
I do too. I still always point to, and I had the very misguided hope after episode 4 that, potentially Jod could end up living on Adatin with these kids and kind of getting the life that his path took him away from, which obviously can't happen because he still is, an ass. But but I do think that I still am so attached to that scene when he gets them back from Amelie's boyfriend, and which is what he'll always be. So I know he's Strix, but in my head he's Amelie's boyfriend. Uh, and he's embracing the kids, and he's talking to Fern, and Fern is so kind of taken aback that he did this kindness for them, and he's like, "Oh, of course," and he downplays it. And I was like, "This is the such a tender, genuinely beautiful moment. Like there's something in him that attaches to this idea, even if ultimately he kind of flips on it. But we'll see if there's a season 2. I hope we get more Jod, and I'm curious which way the wind blows for him.
I mean, this is an era of the timeline too that he could end up at Luke's school.
True.
He could end up training Wim.
I don't think he should be training anybody, but that's
I
just
don't, which
me.
makes it that much more interesting. Um, and if he is Crimson Jack, he could still end up boarding the Halcyon in that comic.
Yeah, that's true. Although I do think I am one of those people that still subscribes to the idea that, Crimson Jack is one of those names that gets passed from person to person.
Yeah. No, that's also totally plausible. I want more Kim too. I want just a show
I
about
want so much Kim.
the astrogational observatory. Um, no, the show was just so fun and it asked so many interesting ideas about the universe, and I loved the supervisor's reveals that like they the supervisor knew more about the universe than the people did,
Yeah.
right?
Also, can I just say, look, we're living in weird times, so that's informing this feeling, but I'm like, is it so bad to live on a sequestered planet that's run by a Stephen Fry robot? Maybe not.
Yeah.
I might choose it if given the opportunity.
Yeah. No, especially if like we're cut off from everywhere else and everything's nice and everyone else has healthcare.
It's
Um,
amazing.
but no, it was interesting that he's like, yeah, the Jedi were traitors. That was the last message we got from the Republic.
Yeah.
Meaning that Palpatine had to know they were there.
Oh, that's interesting.
That Palpatine would have had to know that in order to get that message sent to them,
Well, unless it's like
like an automatic thing.
the emergency broadcast system and they just closed all of their communications off after that, figuring like we don't want to risk Jedi coming through.
Yeah.
So I think there's still some nebulous there about whether Palpatine how
That
much Palpatine knows about AT-AT's status.
that message got out though,
Hmm.
at regardless. Um, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
And it really shades the idea that like, okay, the Jedi are traitors, but the supervisor never put out the order to like, let's suppress all the information about them because Wim still hero worships them.
Right.
They still have them in their storybooks and things. I really love, and I don't know, I love the idea that it's still this like utopia too. When you look at it compared to Ad Akron, especially
Yeah.
going back there after having been to Ad Akron,
Yeah.
um, and knowing that that laser cannon is there, and knowing that all these defense systems were there from the get-go, and that they just never had to use them.
Right. Or that Stephen Fry Robot is a pacifist.
Yeah,
See, he seems like he's doing a pretty good job, is what I'm saying.
yeah,
um, I oh, I'm so attached to this show, and I'm so like I this past week, being the first week we didn't have, was it the first week or was it the second? That we didn't have a new episode. I was like, Mer, I guess I just have to watch like my garbage on Bravo, not Star Wars tonight. I like having Star Wars as appointment television. It's like a very hopeful spot in the week.
yeah. No, I finished since we had Skeleton Crew over, um, we finished Bad Batch with Kingston, and then we've been watching Obi-Wan Kenobi with him.
Oh,
Um, Bad Batch was that show hits hard,
yeah.
but um, no, Skeleton Crew was just I loved. There's so many little moments in there that I loved, and
Oh, yeah. I mean,
and
this last episode, the season finale, has so many really beautiful things. As you said, some of it is like the denouement of calling back to something and showing, what's been learned. Like I think we all had that moment when Neil gets hit and he falls off his hover bike and we all gasp and get worried. But the way he just hops up and then rolls over and like finds his little corner of shadow, I'm like, "Oh, he learned all that from his French parkour girlfriend." And it's so sweet. Um, but the other moment that really like it is super beautiful, and my best friend Dawn, who has been on the show, mentioned this, and I was like, "Oh, you're 100% spot on." When they go and they get KB and they go to the ship that has crashed and they don't know what her fate has been, and the ship's ramp opens and treasure falls out and KB kind of tumbles along with it. It's like really making this parallel that the kids are the real treasure of Ad-Aten, and it's so sweet and so beautiful. This show is so dang good.
yeah, no, I love that too, where each kid sort of learned what their part had to be, and each kid, their character developed to play that part perfectly. Where KB was there in a utilitarian sense, each kid developed that part where KB was there because she could memorize how to fly the ship and send the message and memorize how to get the message to Kim and memorize the coordinates and everything. Um, Neil was there to make those connections with people so that he could learn how to um, overcome his fears and be able to take out use the turbo laser. Um, Fern was there to BS Jod and stall him in a way that like even Jod was like, I really have no idea if you're telling the truth or not.
Right.
And even her mom was like, is this real? Is this not? Like, I'm not even sure. Like, Fern was just really good at that. And Wim was there to be the conscience for everybody, that adventurous spirit, but also that like we're gonna do good the whole
Yeah.
time for everybody and for his dad. When his dad got to be on a speeder with them, um, because Wim was just like, we're doing this, like no one else is going to. We have to do this. And his dad was like, no, like the supervisor's going to take care of it. And Wim's like, no, we've got to do this. Um, that was so amazing. And they explain like that moment when they explain the plan to his dad, and they're like, are you going to be able to handle this part? And he's like, I'm a level 7 systems analyst. Like,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. It was so good.
Yeah.
Um, and then that was so touching too, the relationship between Wim and his father, where there was that slow evolution where in the beginning, Wim's dad was just very much keeping him at arm's length and very focused on his work. And then when Wim was gone, he realized like how much he missed him and how much he'd been not deprioritizing him, but taking him for granted.
Right.
And then treating him like a kid younger than he was. Right. And not giving him the independence he needed, and not trusting him. And then by the end, really being able to fight for him and be a tireless advocate for him in the way that he couldn't show and didn't show at the school, where like when he was at the school and Wim got in trouble and tried to like tell him what was going on, he didn't stand up for him, he didn't hug him, he didn't
Right.
comfort him in any way. There was nothing there. And that really rankled me the wrong way the first time I watched that interaction in episode 1, where Wim's dad was just like, I had to work. Like this was a really big interruption. Like this kind of sucked. Like I'll see you at home. Bye.
Yeah.
Like he didn't stand up for him. He didn't give him a hug. He didn't assure him like we'll talk about this, or like it's okay. Like we'll talk about it later. Like you can tell me about it. Like nothing. There was no warmth to that at all. It was just annoyance. And to see that change after Wim's absence, and to see Wim inspire him with his words and his deeds and his passion to do the right thing by the ending, and to see him rouse the best of his father's character by the end, it was really powerful. And I really loved it. It was a really great performance. It was really great writing, both in the dialogue and just the direction and trajectory for the characters. It was just really, really good stuff.
Yeah. Um, I was very, very moved. I feel like it's been fun to talk with other fans and discuss like which kid everybody identifies the most with. Um, that's been quite delightful. Um, but Fern's journey for me was kind of the most, I don't, I the most kind of personally emotionally hitting. Do you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
watching her figure out, she's always been walking this weird line of being both rebellious and an achiever, which I super identified with as a kid. But then also learning that there is a huge difference between being bossy and being a leader, and watching her go through that and figure out how to be an empathetic leader and how to treat people with kindness and respect and support them instead of just telling them what to do was like so beautiful to watch. It was very, very good. And was very moving for me. I really like all these kids. They're so good.
Yeah, no, the kids were great. And that was something I read in an interview. John Watts had talked about that he had talked to Richard Donner at one point before he passed away. And Richard Donner had sort of given him the advice that, like, you're not casting the part,
Right.
you're casting the kid. And the kid is going to fill the part because, like, you just want to cast the kid's personality. And I think these kids really embodied all of the characters that they were playing. And
Yeah.
when you look at Goonies, it's the same thing, right? Like Sean Astin is really hard to take out of that part, or Ke Huy Quan as Data, or hell, Corey Feldman as Mouth, or whatever, right? Like
Yeah.
you can see aspects of Bryan still in Josh Brolin. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
Um, even with those older kids, right? Like you can see those aspects of their personality still shining through with them as humans even today.
Yeah.
Um, it came as no surprise that the kid who played Chunk is like a lawyer now. You know,
Yeah. Uh oh gosh, it's so so good. I literally have it running silently in the background as we're talking and I'm like, this scene too. Ooh, also this. I love it all so much. I also love that like there was not like a cute postscript on the denouement. It ends like 80s movies used to end, where it's like, I guess you don't have to take that test. Cut to music.
yeah. Like I loved that with the 80s movies, where it was just like you didn't have to get all of those. Like it just it reminded me of the ending of Die Hard 2. And I only think of Die Hard 2 a lot for this because they've got that matte painting of the airport from Die Hard 2 at Lucasfilm. You know the one
Yeah,
I mean? Where
I
it's
know the
just
map
like,
painting. Can I just tell you, I still haven't seen any Die Hards. I can't make it through them.
that's fine, but you've seen the painting.
Yes.
Where like, just to give you the quick run through of Die Hard 2, basically it's Die Hard, but instead it's at an airport, and it ends where the terrorist attack is over and the plane lands and his wife gets out and cops start swarming everywhere, and you don't really know what happens beyond that, except for like he meets with his wife and the sirens are blaring, the flashing lights are coming everywhere, and the camera just starts panning out, the music picks up, the lights or the credits start going, and that's it. It's just it pans out further and further onto this wide shot of the airport, and it's like there's nothing more that needs to be done. Like that's it. He foiled the
Right.
attempt. Movie over.
Mission accomplished. We can all go.
Yep. Nothing about the aftermath, nothing about the ramifications of anything that happened,
Yeah.
nothing whatsoever. It's just like, well, bad guy's dead. Let's go.
Let's
We're
wrap
out
this
now.
up. Wrap this up. My wife's got a meatloaf in the oven. Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was so charming that they didn't succumb to that kind of standardized denouement that we've become accustomed to of like, and then cut to 6 months later and we see At-Atten rebuilding. Like we didn't need it. And in fact, this leaves open so many wonderful possibilities.
Well,
Like for
because
all
it's
we know, if they get a season two, it picks up the next morning, which would be
or
hilarious.
or it could pick up, well, I don't think it could because of the ages of the kids.
Oh, true.
Um,
They'd have to like start today.
but they would have to like, well, even then, I mean, they shot this a couple of years ago, right? Because they
Yeah.
showed us footage from this stuff at Celebration a couple of years ago.
Was there footage?
I think so.
I don't remember footage, but that doesn't mean anything.
Um, I'll have to go back and look at my notes.
I just don't remember there being anything until pretty late in the game in terms of actually seeing shots from the show.
Um, but well, regardless, the idea of what happens on At Aden is so much more wide open, and it creates a really interesting, intriguing narrative mystery, so that if we cut 2 years later, however things have changed is going to create a question for us to have to answer, to go like, oh, how have things shifted over those 2 years in a way that will invest us more in the narrative,
Right.
to make us ask those questions in ways that are really interesting, rather than having to spoon feed us. We'll just be like, oh, that's different. Oh, this functions differently. Oh, things look different. Oh, things are different, right? Um, the same way, um, I'm trying to think of a really good example in Star Wars, because I think we've seen some of this in other places. Um, well, I mean, actually, in um, Rise of Skywalker, when Rey shows up at the Lars homestead and it's just sort of covered in sand, right? Where
Right.
we just have to go like, oh, this has been derelict for a long time. And we just have to sort of tell the story of what might have happened between now and the last time we saw it.
Right. Maybe a subsequent season will be them in high school, and we'll see Neil and Runa as the prom king and queen. And of course, in my head, I'm like, ooh, then they could do a spin-off that's like Star Wars Carrie, but that's just a whole other thing.
Yeah, no, that's yeah. Yeah, that's a whole different style of
It's a whole different
thing.
vibe, ma'am.
I'm trying to think of like what the teenage equivalent of like the Goonies would be in the 80s that they would like really latch onto. But the thing is like it's still the Goonies and E.T. It's just their roles shift, and instead of being like Elliot and Data and those kids, they turn into like the Bran and the older teenagers, and they've got younger kids underneath them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If they pick the same tone. I mean, they could go full Breakfast Club with it or American Graffiti, right? They already leaned into the American Graffiti thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I mean, I hope we'll see.
Yeah,
Heaven
no.
knows.
Well, it's weird. Like it seems as though reports about the viewership coming out have not been as stellar as I would have expected, because it seems like praise for the show has been pretty unanimous.
Mhm.
Um, but then viewer numbers have been coming out for Acolyte, and they've been saying that it was the second highest viewed show on Disney Plus last year in its entirety. And I think the only show more viewed was probably Bluey,
Right. I
which
did
no
have a
nothing's
weird
nothing's going to beat Bluey.
Right. I did have a weird moment the other night that I meant to mention to you, which is that I was at a work dinner with three other people who work in media. None of them knew what Skeleton Crew was,
Huh.
which was weird to me. Like it freaked me out. Because it was like, we were just catching up. Some of them are colleagues I haven't seen in a long time since we're all working so remotely, and we got to talking about, oh, what is everybody watching these days, blah blah blah. And I said, well, I've been, mainlining Skeleton Crew over and over. And one of them said, what is that? And I was like, um Star Wars Skeleton Crew, and they were like, is it like the Mandalorian? And I was like, no. Like they just didn't have any context for it at all, and it was very, very
Which is
sobering.
weird, because like I've been seeing, like I saw advertisements in places for Skeleton Crew that I never saw for Acolyte. Like even still, like the buses here in Salt Lake City still have Skeleton
Yeah,
Crew all over them.
right. I mean, they even have like a meal prep tie-in promotion, right? They did some really interesting promotion, and I don't know if it's just that the field of media is so wide at this point that even something that's super highly promoted is going to see a smaller fraction of eyeballs than it used to. Or if it's that, so much of what we are served. I mean, obviously, a side of a bus does not work this way, but particularly if you're very online and that's where you spend a lot of your time, either for work or leisure, or for a lot of people, both. So much of what we get served in terms of advertising is based on our previous behavior, that it might make it tricky for people to discover a new thing if it's not already kind of in their zone of stuff they're already into.
I also wonder, and this is going to be a neutrally political statement, but I wonder how much, because of how when Skeleton Crew started around election season, people just tuned out because they were sick of election stuff.
That's entirely possible, right? We're at a time when like information saturation is a real problem.
Yeah. So
Everybody's
people
brain needs a break,
so people were just like, I don't want to know anything, I don't want to hear anything, and I'm just out.
right? I'm gonna go play with my kids outside. I'm gonna, you know,
Yep.
do these things. Yeah, I don't know. But it did surprise me. The three people who work in media had never even heard of it. Especially because like we're swimming in it all the time. But I
Yeah.
also was surprised that nobody knew about the 1922 Murnau version of Nosferatu. So I had a lot of surprises that night.
Yeah, no, that's interesting also. Um,
Yes.
I mean, it, it's funny though, I heard that Robert Eggers was actually quite thankful for SpongeBob for introducing a lot of people to the Murnau version of Nosferatu.
Which is precious and adorable.
Yeah. I mean, that's how my kid got introduced to Nosferatu because he asked me about it when he was that age. When
Right.
Anakin was watching SpongeBob, he was like, because I was laughing hysterically at that joke when it came in, and he's just like, why is that funny?" And I went and explained Murnau and the silent Nosferatu and all of that stuff in extreme and excruciating detail for like an 8-year-old.
They've
Um,
got to learn it sometime.
yeah, no, I wonder how much of that media literacy and like that history sense of media that people get comes from like media saturation that's around, and how much of it comes from just like their parents and their environment. Because like I feel like there's stuff that were cultural touchstones to me when I was a kid that just feel like common knowledge that my kids have no connection to whatsoever, because it was just on TV all the time, or that I
Right.
had to introduce to my kids because there is no TV, right? Like when I was a kid, like Three Stooges and Gilligan's Island and I Dream of Jeannie was on TV all the time. And if I want my kids to see any of that, I have to track it down and show it to them.
Right. We don't have the flipping channels that we grew up with that sometimes exposed you to stuff you might not otherwise find, right? That's how I found all the Universal monsters.
Yeah. No, and
That's
those are
how.
things that I've had to show my kids as well.
Right. Because now you don't have like it's Saturday afternoon, programming is all kind of weird. It's nothing new. That those were the dead zones where they did not put new content out on day parted television. So that's where I got a lot of my taste actually is from those like it's a rainy day, I don't or it's sweltering hot, I don't feel like going outside, so what's on TV? This is weird. Oh,
And
the creature you say.
I think those things are kind of the key to to better enjoying other things too. I think having that grounding in like I think knowing Treasure Island and knowing
Right.
the Disney version of Treasure Island and knowing Treasure Planet and knowing Muppet Treasure Island and knowing all that. I mean, like just a couple of years ago, I went on a binge and watched like every version of Treasure Island that I could get my hands on, just to see how many people did different adaptations and iterations, and read the book as well, just to kind of track that cultural thing. Um, and it's funny, like the way we think pirates speak stereotypically all originated in like the performance of Long John Silver in that Disney Treasure Island. Like he just did that, and that like it didn't appear before that movie, and now it's just the standard for how pirates speak. in
Well, some
movies.
of it appeared in terms of like written cadence in the much contested Brief History of Pirates, which was written by a person who may or may not have been a pirate, and may or may not be telling the truth, right? Which is a very old book. But in terms of us getting it in modern to a modern ear, the reading of that and how it was read, yes, that is where it lands.
Yeah, like he just and he I mean like he nailed it. Like he really set the tone for what people think pirates are in a way that like now we look back at his performance in Treasure Island and go like that's a little comical, but like he just like he kicked the door in and was like I'm a pirate, guys. Like his performance was a tour de force back then.
Yeah.
Um but like knowing that knowing what that knowing all of that and having been exposed to all of that in those different eras of pirate media, I think really helped my enjoyment of Skeleton Crew immensely.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Well, it also, it informs you,
yeah.
right? Episode one, when they are in that opening scene of the pirates, having their attack on the other ship, and they call him Silvo. I was like, great. So he's Long John Silver. He came to this in some kind of way, right? Like it informs what you think of Jod right out of the gate. And if you
Oh
don't
yeah.
have that, that's why a lot of people I think were left guessing, like, is that the same? Yeah, it's the same person.
Well,
Um,
and it telegraphs his turn back against the kids too.
uh-huh.
Because in those stories, I mean, Long John Silver kind of like gains the trust of Jim Hawkins and gets him to work with them and like convinces him he's a great guy and then turns on him the second the treasure's in his grasp.
Yeah.
And calling him Silvo has that added um meta textual benefit to an audience who understands those symbols and that extra layer of subtext to say this is how the story's going to work. They aren't accidents.
Right.
Um and it helps you be like a way more informed viewer and understanding the turns the story's going to take.
Yeah.
And it makes the stories feel more elegant and it helps you understand them better. I was explaining this to somebody the other day. Actually, I watched Cutthroat Island for the first
Uh-huh.
time. And I didn't hate it. It wasn't great. Um, but I didn't hate it, and I rated it like a 2.5 stars on Letterboxd. And somebody came up to me and they're like, You liked that movie way more than it deserves. And I'm like, well, why? And they were like, oh, it was just so bad. And they were trying to ask me, like, well, why did you give it as many as 2.5 stars? And I'm like, well, for one, 2.5 stars is not a ringing endorsement. Like,
Right.
let's be straight about this. But I had to explain, I was like, imagine a 1930s swashbuckling pirate movie with Errol Flynn, but cast Gina Davis in it with all of the ridiculousness and silliness and how much of a smile those Errol Flynn movies, like think of Adventures of Robin Hood in 1939 or Captain Blood and the smile of how cheesy those are that those put on your face and put Gina Davis in it with modern effects and Frank Langella like just chewing the scenery as the villain in the Charles Laughton, Claude Rains, Basil Rathbone sort of role.
Yeah.
What's not to enjoy there at least 2.5 stars?
Right.
And
Matthew Modine, for heaven's sake.
yeah, and he goes, "Oh, I guess I never really thought about it that way." And I'm like, yeah, I think the reputation that movie had is because nobody thought about it that way.
Right.
And there was probably more to do about how much that movie cost in the making of that movie that affected the perception of that movie than anything. But couching it in that history of knowing, like, hey, I like all these Errol Flynn movies, and Gina Davis got to do all of the cool Errol Flynn stuff.
Yeah.
and that was just fun to watch. It wasn't a great movie, but it was fun, and I had a smile on my face the whole time, and it reminded me of, like, I could almost imagine it in that really bright Technicolor,
Yeah.
like 30s process of like Adventures of Robin Hood, or even the the black and white of the older films. I'm not going to say it's a great film, but knowing that history of the films before it helped me enjoy it better.
Right. Well, it's kind of like going, I went to the store and I bought a bunch of Little Debbie's and I'm pissed off it's not filet mignon. It's like, no, they're good for what they are. They're supposed to be a snack that is fun and not necessarily good for you.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. Like I always get a little frustrated by that. Like every time someone does, and again, people are allowed to not like stuff. That's fine. But it seems like every time someone doesn't like something, the criticisms that usually get lobbed, going back to my earlier point, are like these sort of pastiche put-togethers of what they have heard other critics saying about various things. And it's like, right, but what menu did you order from?
Yeah.
Like it's not everything is gonna be Moonlight. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
can't.
Like Andor and Skeleton Crew are not coming from the same menu.
No.
Like like if
Both
Andor and
delicious.
yeah, if Andor and Skeleton Crew are coming off the same menu, it's because Skeleton Crew is on the kids party
Right, it's a
menu,
different section of the menu.
and Andor is coming off of the like adult entree menu that comes with the special three courses and the flight of wine.
Yes, 100%. It's
Um
like, oh, all of the herbs used in tonight's meals were grown in-house. None of them have been touched by pesticide or human hands except at the point where they were harvested. Like
or it's
it's
like
a very different
Andor
thing.
Andor is like the main course at the really fine restaurant, and Skeleton Crew is like the chicken nuggets that they put on the menu for the kids because they
Yeah.
won't order anything else.
Yeah, but sometimes you want those chicken nuggets and they're great.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. Um,
We have come up with the best metaphor.
yeah. They both need to be on the menu.
Yeah, and they're both perfectly valid choices. It's the whole point is that there is variety and different cooks will do different things. It's kind of like, do you remember during a panel, I think it was at Salt Lake, where I mentioned that I think of Star Wars the same way I think of shrimp and grits?
Yeah.
Because that's like one of my favorite dishes of all time. And almost anywhere I go, if I have never eaten there before and they have it on their menu, I'll try it because I want to see how they make it. And that's the same thing with Star Wars. I want to see how different people make it and what they come up with because everybody's going to do it a little bit differently. Um, and I love that. And
Yeah.
also, shrimp and grits can be both highbrow and lowbrow depending on where you get it and how it's made.
Yeah. It's true.
Everything is shrimp and grits in my heart.
All right. I think we're at our time, Holly. Where can people find you?
Looking for some shrimp and grits immediately because
Oh,
now
I
I've
know.
talked about it so much. I think I'm gonna have to go make some. But I am on Blue Sky as Holly Fry and on Instagram as Surly Girly 5 and still making stuff you missed in history class for the foreseeable future. You can find that at Missed in History various places and Criminalia as well. The book tied to Criminalia, Killer Cocktails, is still out and available wherever you get books. How about you, Brian?
You can find me at my website at swankmotron.com or across social media at swankmotron, mainly Blue Sky these days. You can also find my brand new Battletech book, which came out this week. Battletech Voidbreaker is out wherever books are sold. You can get a signed copy at swankmotron.com. And as far as Full of Sith goes, I hear, Holly, we're actually going to do a convention together again soon.
That is the rumor.
Um, we'll be at Indianapolis Comic Con in March doing a live show.
Yeah.
So you can look that up. But for Full of Sith, you can go to fullofsith.com. for the entire back catalog of the last 12 years of shows and listen to everything, and send us an email at holocron@fullofsith.com, or you can go to wherever it is you listen to the show and rate and review it, and we'd really love that. And tell your friends about us, and hopefully we'll see you in Indianapolis. So unless you think there's anything else, Holly.
No.
Okay. Well, then for super producer Mike Pilot and for Holly Fry, I'm Bryan Young, and the Force will be with you always.
Sir, if you'll not be needing me, I'll close down for a while.